Hello, everyone. Today we welcome Mr. Dan Collins from Miami, Florida, from the United States, to join us to talk about mainly on the China-US relationship. So tell us, Dan, what was your experience in China? How did you go to China in the first place?
I went to China in 1998 as an exchange student at Tsinghua University. I was there 6 months and then started working in General Motors China and spent 20 years in China altogether. I still have an apartment there now. And
Okay.
yeah, so it's 20 years in China. Been everywhere, all over the place. I got to experience the kind of boom years of China, really, late 90s to really 2015, 2017. So really incredible, like fast. Well, I always say the fastest industrialization in the history of the world. So I lived through that, seeing all the
Yeah.
new buildings, come up and the new factories and the yeah, it was a fun time. So
So you studied engineering, I presume?
yeah, my background's engineering. When I was at Tsinghua, I did a lot of it was my last semester of school out of my undergrad in US, and so I didn't have a heavy workload, but I did have the opportunity to work with some high-level professors at Tsinghua that were actually under a guy named Zhu Rongji at the time, which some people may remember. We called him the boss of China. He
Yeah.
was very influential in reform of the state-owned enterprises. So I was heavily involved at that time, doing this kind of research work at Tsinghua. But then my career ended up being basically reforming some of the state-owned enterprises because General Motors, we had done of huge investments in
Yeah.
China at the time, buying a lot of component plants.
Yeah.
So I was sent out into all over the place, Dongbei, Sichuan, you name it. Every week I was on the road in China working with our joint ventures, trying to, modernize them at the time. So.
So we missed each other just 3 years. I started in Tsinghua in 91.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you
Yeah.
were at Tsinghua. Great. That 10 years, 1990s, we were using renminbi, things like that.
Yeah.
Some of my friends that were in China before that, that was a whole different world. They
Yeah.
were using the foreign exchange coupons, but I still got to see the kind of beginning of the transition. Even in China, people can't believe, like I used to go to the friendship store
Yeah.
just to buy coffee.
Yeah.
Or things like that. There was no Starbucks. There was no, I
Yeah.
would leave the dorm room. People would follow me around like, whoa, there's a foreigner here. What's he doing? So, yeah, it was a different time and China just modernized so fast. It was pretty incredible to see. So,
So how is your experience in China shaped your view on the current China-US trade war, on Trump's tariff war?
trade war. Yeah. So the trading system is highly complex. Okay. The whole tariff debate, highly complex. We have to go back to really like post World War II order, what has happened, and the world's become highly imbalanced. Okay, it's become, United States today has 330 million people, and it's basically deindustrialized. They don't make anything. So we are in U.S. here. We're doing 10 million cars a year production. We did that in 1970 when we had less 150 million people less. We're not making antibiotics. We're not making, a lot of our pharmaceuticals, almost zero chemicals, all of our auto parts. So what happened is the world over this era of globalization, which I think is kind of, it will continue, but it's basically reached an unsustainable point. So you had Germany, they were what I call neo-mercantilists. They were big, exporters. 8% of their GDP were exports, okay? Japan, South Korea, many of these countries are what we call neo-mercantilist. They built up under trade barriers where they protect their own market and then they export into other markets. You earn the foreign exchange, you put that back into your own economy and you build it up. And China kind of followed that own model as well of development, although it was very open in bringing in foreign companies as well to participate in the China market. So there was a bit difference there. But what has happened in the world basically is you had these major exporters, and somebody's trade surplus is somebody else's trade deficit. And the US ended up with the trade deficit, literally a trade deficit with everybody. And you have 330 million people, 40% are on some form of government program. They're not working. Okay. We saw that in the recent food stamp crisis here, where they cut off the government was shut down, and all of a sudden you've got 40 million people that aren't going to get access to government services. So the world's become highly unbalanced, and I think it's also for those exporters, they have an issue too. Why does a country like China want to keep, do all the work, get the pollution, buy all the materials, take all the risk, and then export something, and then the U.S. just print the currency and get the goods? So I see the globalization itself went too far one direction, became a little unbalanced. So the trade war, the whole quote unquote trade war, is really just the United States trying to reindustrialize, basically. It's actually deindustrialized at this point, from what.
So you agree with the general objective of the policy, but not the actual tactics like the tariff.
That would that would be correct. I think I've advocated for a tariff in U.S. for probably 20 years, but not a huge tariff, right? It's just enough to
Targeted.
balance 15-20%. Not a lot of people realize China just grew the world's most largest, most dominant manufacturing sector in the world behind high tariffs. To this day, they have 45% tariff on electric vehicle into China. So China was smart that, under this whole infant industry program, they call it. This is a United Nations program. If you're not capable to make something, you're allowed to kind of semi-block your own market until you can get scale. And that's where the US is. We've lost all the manufacturing. So I think in terms of the ideas, the Trump administration has it correctly that, look, we're going to have to, if Germany has a 10% tariff, we're going to have a 10% tariff. If China is exporting, and they have 45% tariff, why shouldn't we have 45% tariff? So they're putting in tariffs to reindustrialize. I did not agree with the whole concept, how they executed it. So they're like 145%, that kind of thing, and on again, off again. The tariff situation has created a lot of chaos in the business environment, the business community. And that's what you didn't want to see. So I was a proponent of come in on day one, 25% tariff on everybody, that's it. And then you walk away. And then you let the system resort itself, because these things, I was managing factories for decades, right? These things don't happen overnight. You have to build factories, you have to build supply chains. It takes time to reorient this whole globalization system that's been in place for 40 years, and you can't just change it this week. It takes time to change.
So you propose a 25% tariff on everybody, but what about the free trade agreement you had with Canada and Mexico?
So I think Canada and Mexico are special cases. Canada and US, we're very, economically, it's not that different. The issue is when you have a 25% tariff in US and Canada and Mexico have 0%, the goods just come into Canada and they just come into Mexico and then they get sent into the US. So there's tariff cheating all over. I mean, it's commonplace. So
But
that was the
didn't
issue.
didn't Trump didn't Donald Trump himself sign the agreement with Canada and Mexico in the first term?
Yeah,
Now,
he did. Yep, yep. And
so now you
and
have to.
a lot of the trade between Canada and Mexico is still under that North America trade agreement. But I think the 1.0 administration, Trump 1.0, they ran into this issue where all of a sudden you saw billions of dollars in aluminum coming from China into Canada
Yeah.
and then Canada into the US. So it's basically skirting around the tariffs. So it wasn't allowing the reindustrialization of US to happen, which is what they wanted. We saw a little pickup in 2016, but it wasn't enough. This is going to take a long time to reindustrialize.
But what about the products that the US actually have no intention to make, like say coffee or bananas?
Yeah,
Then a tariff on those things, I think the White House just admitted la last week
yeah,
that they're going to reduce the tariff on those stuff. So basically,
yeah,
they are admitting they are wrong to impose them in the
yeah,
first place.
yeah. That makes no sense. Also, even things like footwear, it doesn't make sense.
It will only
let
take
it
them 10 months to realize that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was a bonehead move. So what they did is they had an economist in charge of this plan, Peter Navarro. And I always criticize economists because they've never actually had a real job. They don't really know how things work, how
It,
real supply chains function.
is Peter Nara actually economy? I thought he was crazy. I mean, I think
He's he's
not
out.
many of his
He's what.
colleagues agree with his ideas.
Well, I think I would say he's always been an outlier in terms of the economist circle, but most economists in general are brain dead on terms of how real economies work. A lot of the DC policy establishment, I call these people laptop warriors. They've never had a real job. They don't know how things work. If you ask them what a forging or a casting is, they would have no clue. How this gets made, how they have no idea. So they make a lot of bad policy decisions based on that. And Navarro came out with a whole tariff thing, and it was just convoluted. I understand why they were doing that. They were saying, okay, even if we match tariffs for, say, Korea, doesn't mean Korea's going to buy your stuff. They're just going to use other methods around tariffs, right? Even to this day, Korea's not going to buy cars from Japan. They're not going to buy them from China. They're not going to buy them from the US. Japan's not going to buy Korean cars. They're not going to buy Chinese cars. So everyone blocks their own markets in different ways. You have tariffs and you have non-tariff trade barriers. So that's why I think he came out with this whole base it on the trade balance, but it just, you have to keep these things simple and they really botched the trade. And I think we're seeing that in the GDP numbers. We're seeing freight deliveries in US
Yeah,
this year are down around 17, 18%. So I look at real economic indicators, how many cars you're making,
yeah,
how much freight you're moving, how much electricity you're producing. And the US has been in I would say, a recession several years now, going back into the Biden administration even. Our housing market's been frozen for 4 years basically. There's no units moving, right? It's just it's kind of dead in the water. So we're at 2009 levels in a lot of economic indicators in terms of recession. So the tariffs have not helped. It's pushed things into a negative area for sure.
yeah. But if as you suggested a 25% across the board tariff, wouldn't that be causing a recession or an inflation in the US?
So I think it might in some cases and it might not in others. The problem is the difference is, if you look at export prices between China and the US, you're talking about 400 or 500% difference. A lot of those profits are made by the companies that buy it in China, they import it.
Yeah,
Most of China's trade surplus, around half of it is US companies buying in China and bringing it into the US. They mark that good up
yeah,
4 times, 5 times. So
yeah.
in many cases, if it's a 25% tariff, they'll eat it. But in many cases, I did many over the decades. I've done so many business cases where, if you have a 25% tariff, that is a big decision factor in where you will locate the production. I will say globalization. I talked about this whole globalization. One of the things that happened was between the year 2000 and 2015, before Trump got in, the United States had the world's second highest corporate tax rate. Okay, it was 35%. Then you add on state, local, you add on have to pay health insurance, and it made the US completely unviable place to manufacture anything. Okay, and so what happened is the factories, the real production was looking for every avenue it could find. It wasn't just China. We were looking move stuff to Philippines, move stuff to Mexico. It was just that China came up with the best solution for everybody on moving their manufacturing. It was like, come on in, you get 0% tax for 3 years, you get 15% after that. We'll
Zero
help you
trade
with
union worries.
Right, yeah, exactly. We'll give you here's HR people to find workers, here's construction companies to build your factory. So they created a whole turnkey system where the Fortune 500s could come in and go, "Oh, this is great." And what you do is you move the physical plant and asset offshore to anywhere, could be China, could be anywhere. Then it comes back in, you are able to recognize your profits offshore with 0% tax. This is not like something like you niche thing. Everyone did this.
Yeah.
All the Fortune 500s. They do this today. Apple today has never paid more than say 8% tax rate, right? So it was basically to avoid taxes is why US lost all this manufacturing base. So when Trump got back in, he put the tax rates, corporate tax rates down to 21%. Then all of a sudden, okay, it makes it viable. Like, okay, we'll just pay the 21%. So you start to see a little more fixed asset and plant investment in US. Now with the tariff, you've got really one, you've got tax incentives that will let you depreciate the whole factory investment in US. So I'm expecting, you saw Toyota just yesterday announced $15 billion in new manufacturing in the United States. You're going to see a lot of new manufacturing come back to the US. It just is going to take time to come in to increase the jobs and the GDP. So,
Um, so what about Mr. Trump's insistence that all the tariff are all paid by the foreign countries? That's not right, is it? But it
no,
seems to me nobody's correcting him in his inner circle. He keeps telling this wrong claim every day and throughout his life, and no one has
yeah.
dared to correct him. And
Yeah, it's paid. Obviously, it's paid by the importer of record,
yeah,
which is in most cases the U.S. company, and then either they'll eat some of that or they'll pass it down in price.
yeah,
I have seen some studies show they're passing down half of the half of the increase and eating
yeah,
half. So it's all a negotiation, and it depends on what product lines you're talking about. Um, I will say, surprisingly, we haven't seen, and it might be due to the weakness of the economy, but we haven't seen a huge price spike like I thought we
yeah,
would. I actually expected we would see kind of apocalyptic inflation, and I think we would have if we kept the 145%
yeah.
threats, on China. That would have been an absolute catastrophe for consumers. But so far, it hasn't been a total disaster. So,
So, but aren't you concerned that Mr. Trump, the president, is basing his policy on the very incorrect understanding of economics, like who paid the tariff?
yeah. Well, Trump will say a lot of things, but some are right, some are wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, it depends on what actions are happening. I'd look at more what's really taking place, not just I think his base concept is correct. U.S. needs to reindustrialize. It's gotten to the point where you cannot be a superpower and your main export be soybeans. Okay, it's the United States is
yeah.
not competitive internationally on anything except soybeans. So, and I said this 20 years ago. I saw this coming, and so they have to reindustrialize. And the U.S. doesn't have to be a main exporter. It just has to focus on import substitution. So, as I
But
mentioned, yep, go
but
ahead.
the U.S. is competitive in the service industry, is it? Like high tech?
Yeah, high tech, social media, yeah, anything digital we did well. Europe, countries like Germany, and even Japan completely missed the digital revolution, right? They missed phones. Germany or Finland had Nokia at one time, and then they went away, at least in consumer electronics. And yeah, Japan, Germany, these big industrial powerhouses missed the digital
Yeah,
revolution that the U.S. has highly benefited from. And we're still strong in digital. We're strong in software in these kinds of areas. But I mean, services is like a big category. Like, really, what is that? At the end of the day, you really have to, you can't, you have, if you're a smaller country like in Australia or a Denmark, you can make a plan where you don't really need to manufacture. But in a United States, 350 million people now, you're going to have to be able to make some stuff for yourself. You can't expect to import everything. It's just not going to work.
yeah. Okay. So President Trump met President Xi in South Korea, and he seems to have this idea of G2. So basically, raising China's status as equal to the US as two superpowers. And how does that sit with the China hawks in his circle?
They would not like it, of course. They want confrontation with China. Like I said, they don't realize how outmatched they are in terms of economic capacity. They don't get it. As I tell people, like if China really wanted to end the U.S., they could just stop sending goods. It would literally end the United States in 3 to 4 months. I mean, we would have nothing on the shelf. Every factory would go down. This is somebody I'm in supply chains for 25 years, so I know where everything's made. So I can tell you it would be an absolute disaster for the U.S. to confront China. So the China Hawks won't like it. The G2 concept, that's actually a concept that I've been pushing for a long time, and including to some people in Trump's circle. So you have to question where he gets this from. But basically, and I think China was also a backlash of the G2. We don't want to be a G2. We're not an interventionist power. China's never considered themselves that. But I think I come at it from an economic standpoint. Economically speaking, the world is already a G2.
Yeah.
You look at every high tech top 100 high tech companies, only three or four are not Chinese or American. You look at the Fortune 500 now dominated by US and China. So US and China is economically a de facto G2. What that means politically, I don't know for sure, but I think it could mean something as simple as we're just going to be friends, get along, and cooperate. And with these two economic poles in the world, this should benefit everybody's prosperity around the world, right? That's the way we need to look at the world going forward. The top
So,
two economies fighting each other is
yeah.
just crazy.
So I think that will disappoint many of the Chinese American Trump supporters because since I'm Chinese Australian, I'm quite familiar with that social media ecosystem, and
Mm.
most of the Chinese American who supported Trump, they are very diehard anti CCP types, and the only reason they align with Mr. Trump is that they think in their mind that Mr. Trump is gonna damage China's growth and damage China's economy with his trade war, and will constrain the Communist Party and constrain China's rise. But so now they will be sorely disappointed with Mr. Trump recognizing China's equal status.
Yeah, those people, we have a lot of these Falun Gong exiles
Yeah,
in China.
I thought you mentioned that in your tweets. And
Yeah.
why are they targeting you? Because you are
Oh, well, just I kind of tell the reality. I kind of want a peaceful coexistence in a
yeah.
G2, and I tell the truth about China, the good, and I also say some of the bad or where they have challenges. But yeah, they can't take that information. They're constantly on the internet putting this fake stuff out, this crazy stuff that's just ridiculous. I saw one person yesterday, Chinese, I would say Chinese American, but basically someone from China that immigrated to the US, probably Falun Gong. She said China's real population is
Yeah,
only
yeah,
400
she's
million
I think
people.
she's from Falun Gong. Yeah.
It's like so they're out constantly putting this fake information out there. So I get involved in these kind of social media wars with these people from time to time, and they send me like not threatening messages, but they'll send me whatever, just private messages,
Well, I
uh,
think your position seems quite unique as far as I understand, because you are from your tweet history, I would say you are kind of a right-wing MAGA, right? You support generally supportive of Donald Trump, his policy and politics.
generally, yeah. Not that I agree with everything, but I would say I'm with him on terms of the economy and immigration, but within the details, I disagree with a lot of stuff. So
Yeah, so but you are also quite appreciative of China's power and China's growth. And so I guess it's fair to summarize that you are a pragmatist uh, when it
yeah,
comes
I
to
think it's a good.
China. Yeah,
That's probably a
so
good
that's what I'm
term.
saying. I think you're quite unique in that MAGA, so because most of MAGA, I think they will be very hostile to China.
I think so. We have an issue, which is there are people within the CIA that have been poisoning the China-US relationship with a lot of false claims, this stuff over Xinjiang, stuff like that. So they are trying to poison the MAGA base of people with their and keep in mind the average MAGA person knows nothing about China. They don't know anything. They've never been there. They don't know anything about it. So they constantly try to poison these people's minds. I will say within the Trump administration, there's actually a lot of people like myself, a lot of pragmatists, a lot of pro-China people that are close with Trump. There are anti people like Navarro or stuff. But I think if you realize Navarro just got because of the tariff debacle,
Yeah,
he just got taken way
yeah, he
down. Like
hasn't appeared in
he got
public
pushed
for a
way
while, has he? Yeah.
exactly right. So at the end of the day, Trump is a pragmatist. He's a business guy. He wants to do business. You also recently saw a Rand report. So even though we're China hawks like Eldridge Colby, right, in the administration, the Rand paper that just came out and just said, guys, forget about trying to fight China. Like we need to work together because the reality is the reality. You're not going to beat China in, militarily or economically. So the only solution is to get along. Really.
Well, you mentioned Xinjiang. My position is that we have to take a more nuanced view of that issue. It's not that bad, maybe like some of the China hawks suggested, but it's not all rosy like the Chinese authorities suggested. There is mass detention or mass surveillance,
Yes.
mass oppression of the ethnic Uyghur people in Xinjiang out of the national security concerns. It's
Yeah.
like the United States 911, but times 10 in terms of these
Yes.
tactics to control the situation.
Well, yeah,
So,
you have to go back to the time of, I would say, years 2010 to
early,
20,
yeah, early tens, yeah,
early 10s. Yeah. So there was a lot of terrorism by Xinjiang people in China. A lot of not a lot of this got out, right? It was suppressed because China didn't want that bad reputation. But there were many multiple people running people over with
yeah,
cars, mass stabbing events. There,
yeah,
there was mass unrest in Xinjiang itself, but also in other provinces.
yeah.
There were terrorism. There was a big problem that never got out, and then all of a sudden, Xinjiang people are in camps. So what were the camps? They were kind of, you could call them re-education camps, but they were like, one of them is right across from a primary school. So does that sound like a death camp or a genocide? No, of course not. But they were put in, yeah, they were re-educated. They were put in camps, given education, try to increase their Chinese language skills, discouraged from radical Islamic practices, things like that. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's their country. They have to deal with it, and it's no genocide going on. So, I've
Well, I
generally,
think the critics would say because the definition of genocide include uh, include other measures, not just killing people, but other measures in terms of oppression of their culture.
right. But you can say all this about Xinjiang, but then what's going on in Gaza is okay. Carpet bombing 200,000 people to
Yeah, well,
death.
how about they're
You know,
both bad?
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. But like I said, so yeah, that basically the Xinjiang thing was a CIA operation to get that out in the news media. Not that could we as in the Western society deal with that? No, that's beyond our concept, right? It's not. We're different civilizations, different cultures. So, but some of the worst things that were going on about it were just paid propaganda. You know.
Um, all right, well, I guess we'll move on from that. Well, this is a topic for another day. So you, I think you mentioned you support Trump's policy regarding Ukraine. You want the U.S. to decrease its funding of the Ukraine war effort.
Yep.
So, but that, and then at the moment, the U.S. Navy is gathering near Venezuela,
Yep.
and how does isn't that contradictory? You have an America first policy
Yep.
on Europe, but now
Yep.
you seems to be starting actual another war on your doorstep against another country, and
Yep.
which is totally against international law, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because Venezuela is not
I
a
don't
threat
think
to
any,
U.S.
but yeah, I don't think anyone in Trump's base is for a war in Venezuela. I think
But
nobody's
this
for
seems to
that.
be going. There's definitely going to be a war. Is it? You don't station that large part of the Navy there
Right.
without
Yeah, I
going to
agree.
war.
14% of the U.S. Navy is right now off the coast of Venezuela. So it looks like as we're talking, nothing's happened yet except shooting the drug boats,
Yeah.
but it does look like something's going to happen. I agree with you. Um, what's that all about? I think Venezuela. So if
Oil.
you think it's about oil.
Yeah.
Trump is a nationalist, right? So you got to think in what leaders are nationalists and how they think. Putin's a nationalist. I think she's a nationalist. Trump is a nationalist.
Yeah.
And I think Trump's calculus on Venezuela is that we're going to replace Maduro and we're going to put American companies in charge of the oil of Venezuela. I think that's what
Well,
he's
that's
thinking.
always his view in terms of Iraq. He also said that U.S. should regret not grabbing Iraq's oil, right?
We should have never went into Iraq, and he was against that. He was against that war, and that was a debacle. And like Ukraine, it's just one country after the other where we get involved and we make it worse, and
So
we
how,
create millions of
so
dead people.
so so you think the war is necessary against Venezuela?
No, no, I don't. No,
No.
I don't think we should mess with it. Yeah, yeah. I don't
So
think we
so
should do that at all.
how will MAGA react if the war starts?
It's a big problem with MAGA because MAGA's base is non-war. Okay, they're
Yeah.
tired of the wars.
Which is
The
the
end,
which is the part I like about MAGA, I think.
yeah, it's endless war, whereas the DNC side are completely now embedded with the CIA. You know, if you look at the DNC convention, half the speakers were CIA people. So the DNC is basically going to say we're going to give the foreign policy to the CIA, and then you guys keep us in power, and you do all these operations against Trump and all this other stuff. That's kind of a de facto arrangement that's been made in U.S. politics. So the MAGA, yeah, it would be a big blow against MAGA's. MAGA does not favor the war in Venezuela for sure. So they don't favor the wars anywhere. I don't think. You know, even Iran, even though Iran, you could say for the U.S. went well, we didn't lose anybody. There's still not the whole 30 years now of MAGA growing up is anti-war, is focus on America, get out of the wars. That's a base.
So you're from Florida, and there's a huge base of Cuban exiles there.
Yeah.
Aren't you concerned about their influence on the U.S. foreign policy, like all these years of embargo against Cuba, which is to me is totally unnecessary, and
Yeah. No, I
also
agree. I agree. We
against the
should not have.
America First idea, is it? Because
Um,
you want to normalize trade relationship with.
yeah. I don't think so. Cuba is like I think in the American mindset, especially MAGA, Cuba is a very small thing. They don't even think about Cuba. It is big with the South Florida Cuban Americans, right?
Yeah.
Like Mark Rubio.
One a key
They're
swing state. So
It's a key swing state, and they're heavy Trump people now. And Rubio and that group does keep it within the high level Republican Party to keep those sanctions on. So that's still there. I agree with, like from a humanitarian aspect, we should not have sanctions against Cuba. So let them have whatever government they want. The place is so poor. I mean, people living on $2 a day, you know what I mean? So they're no threat to the United States. So yeah, I don't agree. But in terms of a MAGA position, I don't think 99% of MAGA people think of Cuba. I don't think it's on their radar.
um and on your Twitter feed, I think you mentioned that NATO is a zombie alliance and they are bleeding America dry. So are you suggesting that the US exit Europe and just keep to the Western Hemisphere and leave the Europe to Russia?
So I don't think Russia wants Europe. I don't think they have any designs on Europe.
So they only
Um,
want Ukraine. They will stop at Ukraine.
They only want the ethnic Russian areas of Ukraine because they had to go in to protect those people. So you have to Russia, Ukraine, not to get off on a whole diatribe on it, but
Yeah.
those ethnic Russian areas of Ukraine were not Ukraine until 1991. Okay, that was the Soviet province of Ukraine. Khrushchev gave that area to the province of Ukraine. And then when they split apart, the US and NATO turned Ukraine into a base for agitation against Russia. We put in hundreds of billions of dollars, 29 biolabs. We trained the Ukrainian force, all in an effort to drag down Putin so we can get control of Russian resource companies. Okay. Putin kicked out all of the oligarchs, and we've never forgiven him for that. So we're trying to go back and over divide Russia into multiple countries if we could and get those resources. Okay. Then we have an agent on China's northern border, right? Which would be a huge problem for China. So that's the whole concept. This is a war that never should have happened. It never would have happened. But the Biden, it was supposed to start under Hillary Clinton, but she didn't win the election. So they had to wait and to get Biden in there, and then we launched the war. How do we launch the war? They cut off the water to Crimea. They were shelling the civilian populations of Donetsk. So this is just a big NATO proxy war. We literally jumped out of Afghanistan and right into Ukraine. Okay.
Well, so you suggest that Russia's only intention is the Russian-speaking regions, but
Yeah.
wasn't that the same excuse Adolf Hitler has when he started a war against Czechoslovakia? He
Yes.
only wanted those German-speaking population
Correct.
to be protected.
Correct. Yeah, but I would say the only difference there is that the Gdansk and the Sudetenlands and all those areas weren't under attack by their own governments. So the Ukraine has been in a civil war since 2014. So those provinces broke away and they've
Well,
literally been at war.
well, the civil war was agitated by Russian. by Russia.
It was, yeah, they were in there, but before they went in there, the local militias of those areas had taken up arms because Ukraine was couped. We couped Ukraine in 2014. We have been trying to coup Ukraine going back decades. Okay, there was the Orange Revolution, it's 2003. There was, and we finally got it couped in 2014. We've been propagandizing those people against Russians. You know that they're literally their grandfathers were in the same military, in the Soviet military. So nobody is when you have a war like this, nobody is at blameless, right? There's everybody at fault. But if you look at all of the peace, they had peace agreement signed, and we basically killed it. We sent Boris Johnson in to kill the peace agreement, and now you've got millions dead, which I actually predicted when this all started. Um, that would happen. So yeah, it's a horrible thing for humanity. They've got to get adults to go in there and settle it and say, Russians over here, Ukrainians over here. That's it.
Oh,
If
um, okay. So what one of the key rationale, I think, by like people like Kobe, is that the reason they want to withdraw support for Ukraine is to focus the U.S. Resources on East Asia, on Taiwan, to protect Taiwan in a sense. So,
Yep.
so what's your view on that? As I understand, you are not supportive of the U.S. promise to defend Taiwan. I would guess.
No. Yeah, so Taiwan's undefendable. So that's just the reality of it. So first of all, I
But it
say
worked for the last 70 years, the U.S.
it's
strategy.
only because China lets it. Only the main one lets it. So um, go back to the one we've had a one China policy since Nixon, right? 1971 when Nixon went to the Great Wall and everything.
Mhm.
Um, I believe 80% chance that mainland and Taiwan would not come to blows if we do not mess with it. Okay. So the status quo has been working. I don't think mainlanders want to fight Taiwanese, and I know Taiwanese won't fight. If you talk to
But
Taiwanese,
China doesn't want the status quo either. They want to
long
change
term
the
it's an
status
issue.
quo.
Long term it's an issue. So that's why I say I'm a supporter of the status quo because the only thing we can do in the West is make it worse or actually make it happen. So when we agitate, and you saw like recently the Japanese got involved. Oh my God, like that's just like the new Japanese prime minister is talking about Taiwan. If you talk to people in Taiwan, they're not sitting there every day thinking mainland's going to attack. They would literally tell you
Well, because they've been used to this for the last 70 years.
they're
This way.
used to it, and they're like, look, we don't want Taipei destroyed. Okay, Taiwan is you can go from top to bottom in 3 hours on a train. Everyone's living on the West Coast. Okay, it's a little strip of people. They don't even spend more than a couple percent of GDP on their defense. Okay, so they're not serious about it. But when you get all these guys in U.S. that make money from these foreign policy guys, they're making money from the threat. Oh, the China threat. We've run every U.S. war game they've run on defending Taiwan going back 10 or 15 years. It's never worked.
But
They
isn't
don't, they
that the
don't,
counterpoint to that is the only way to prevent forced change of status quo is to achieve peace through strength, what they call
Mhm.
peace through strength, right?
Right.
If the U.S. continue its strong commitment, it will ch keep the status quo.
So if you did that in conjunction with, like I've heard the best strategy for a porcupine strategy for Taiwan, if you literally issue a M16 to every citizen and train them how to use it and prepare a militia, but they don't even really do that. It's
What do you think of Trump's deal with Intel to buy 10%? Isn't that socialism? You're grabbing the means of production?
Yeah, I would call that it's hybrid state capitalism, right? It's kind of like what we've seen in China.
China here.
Yeah, it's a different model. But it's not unprecedented. Like the German government owns shares in Volkswagen. They own shares in Benz, things like these. So it's really I call that a state capitalism model. Something different. I think, it's kind of out of the box, but I kind of think, with this way the US has been going, it's not bad to try something new. And instead of just give these companies money, why not ask for equity? So,
But the only problem I have is that they keep attacking the idea of socialism. But this is
Yeah, yeah. I don't, U.S. We people get caught up in labels,
Yeah.
socialism, communism, capitalism. Reality is, look at if you look how successful China was is been, it's
Yeah.
because they dropped the labels
Well,
and just focused
as
on
Deng
practical.
Xiaoping said, it
Yeah,
doesn't matter you are a black cat or a white cat, right? As
right.
long as you catch the
Exactly.
mouse.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way the US goes. So let's try it out. Don't just give them money, take equity in it and then see how it develops. Yeah.
Um, and you mentioned you support the immigration policy of Donald Trump, but what's your assessment of the current situation where the ICE agents are roaming across the street, neighborhood across America, and just grabbing people with a mask
Yep.
and putting in the vehicles that hasn't been marked? It's like Gestapo tactics.
It's very heavy-handed, but it's not any more outrageous than seeing 20 million people lined up at the border walking in and collecting Social Security and all these other things. So what the Democrats did over the last 4 years was completely outrageous. No country can bring in 20, 30 million people in a short time span. And many of those people are on social government services now. So, yeah, is it heavy-handed? Yeah, but it's got to the point where it's such a problem where the U.S. cities, we've almost lost control of them. The drug cartels run areas. You see the violence we get in major American cities. We talked about Kiev. Like Chicago's way more dangerous than Kiev. I mean, you get Chicago. I ran the numbers a while back. 30,000 people have been shot in Chicago in the last decade. 30,000. That's like a war zone. So we've been losing control of the cities. So I don't think any normal country would put up with the level what we've seen happening in the US with immigration, violence, and all this that's been going on. So do I support it? Do I love it? No. Am I totally against it? Not really. Why do they wear a mask? Because these people dox these people, right? They dox their home addresses, these things like that. We're at the cusp of could almost call it like a mini civil war that's brewing in the U.S. So it's either get control of it now or who knows what it will look like in 10 years.
So, what about those people who haven't committed crime, who live the life peacefully and contribute to the U.S. economy all these years?
They're,
Do you
they're
want them to
it's a
be deported too?
Yeah, of course. It's a crime being there illegally. That's your crime. No other country would just let someone walk in and vote. A lot of people vote. They work for a long time, off the books, not paying taxes. This is completely outrageous. So if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. What's the point of having a country? So
But
these people, the first people they went after were
that would
criminals.
have to deport many of your Florida neighbors.
If they're here illegally, that's too bad.
Yeah.
See you later.
But didn't like even
I lived in
President
China
Biden.
for 20 years. I would never be allowed to become Chinese citizen. Why would someone be come in here and get Social Security and government
Well, you know
benefits?
what?
They're
Why would
getting
they want
more
to
than
be in?
people. They're getting more than retired people that paid into the system for 50 years. They show up, Biden flies them in on planes, and then they get more than someone who paid into the system for 50 years. It's completely outrageous. So we either get control of the country or we lose control of the country. So ugly situations create more ugly situations. That's the way I would summarize it.
But a big part of the U.S. construction labor force are from those undocumented labor. How would that sit with the industrial reindustrialization
You
policy
know,
if you don't have the labor force to build the plants?
yeah. So that's a whole trope. There's a whole trope that we don't have labor. We have 330 million people. Okay. We have 40% of the people collecting government benefits. We have people that are underemployed, underutilized, sitting on their couch. We have people that are on their third generation of welfare benefits. They get them, their fathers, mom got them, and their grandparents got them. Put these people back to work, all right? This is what's created a social decay in the US, which is giving people free stuff. So in some areas like where I'm at, South Florida, yeah, that construction sites are heavy illegal immigrants, but most of the other states it's not that way. Roofers, these are all, working class people. The reason why the US wages have stagnated for 30 years, And the reason why the middle class is now gone is because you've brought in 50 million poor people. And what happens is you drive down wages, okay? And that's what's happened. So there's basically now in the US we have what's called a K-shaped economy. You got the top 10% and you have everyone else. And nobody else can make a living. Even if they work, they can't afford to live. So it's got to a ridiculous point. So
So are you suggesting socialism style of redistribution? Take money from the taxed rich and then redistribute it to the working class.
I'm for more of a, I would be like a flat tax guy because I don't believe the upper echelons pay a huge amount of tax because there's so many loopholes they get out of it. So I would put in a flat tax. You'd actually collect more money and absolutely zero cheating because it's base it off a revenue number or something, you know. So the whole tax system needs to be,
Isn't flat tax
designed.
just a tax on the poor because the poor need to spend most of the income on consumption, and a flat tax
This goes back to
will be
yes, this goes
more
back to theory
burden on
versus
them.
what's actually happening. Yeah. Theoretically, yes. What actually happens is a progressive tax on the top, but they don't pay it. They offshore it, they get around it, they loophole it,
Like
so they
Mr.
don't
Donald
actually pay.
Trump, he didn't pay tax for 10 years.
Yeah, well, he followed all the tax laws. That's why the tax laws have to be rewritten.
Yeah.
Okay, no theory. You have to go to practicality instead of
But
just a
didn't
theory.
Trump promise that because he knew the tax system well, he's the only one who can change it? But that's his second term. He hasn't improved it in any bit, right? He's
We
only
have not.
promising
Yeah,
MAGA that
we have not done much on tax reform so far that I know of. Yeah,
so he
yeah,
hasn't
it needs
closed
to
the
be totally
loopholes.
reformed. Yeah, they need to close all the loopholes. They need to, number one, why you reindustrialize, you get the plants back on shore, and then you can't loophole them. Once your factory's here, it's hard to dodge the tax because you're making it here, you're selling it here. So that's another reason why you want to reindustrialize is to get the tax base back. But yeah, no, I'm in progressive tax is fine. It's just you have to make sure it's actually working, right? It's if it's not working, it's not working.
Well, in
USA,
that
you have to
case,
make more than,
mm,
keep in mind, most of the tax is paid by the rich. So 50% of the people in the US don't pay any tax. If you
what
don't
about the
make,
what about Senator Warren's idea of a wealth tax? Because that way you can't escape that for the super
uh,
rich.
I mean, it depends on how you implement it. I don't think we should have these crazy billionaires, but if you don't want the billionaires, you shouldn't be printing money. So all we do is print money and it drives up asset prices and then the rich get richer. Okay, so if you really want to equalize things, you have to let money go back to labor instead of always pushing money to capital. Money in the United States, 40 years, we've subsidized everything for capital. They try to do a 50-year, instead of let the housing prices come down, now they're saying we do 50-year mortgage, which means the
Crazy
banks get
idea.
more money. Yeah, the banks will
But
get more money.
so that's
So,
that's an interesting episode. Apparently, Donald Trump got this idea from one of his deputies at the Housing
yeah,
Finance Department. So
yeah.
he's easily influenced by the last person he talked to, even for 10 minutes, and then he put it on social media. That's
That
not how
deputy,
governing
that
works.
deputy is Polte, who
Yeah,
is owns the one of the largest U.S. real estate companies in the country.
yeah.
So yeah, he's thinking do what's good for the U.S. housing builders, right? That's because he owns that company. But actually, that went over like a lead balloon. Nobody liked 50-year mortgage. That was destroyed.
Um, okay, so in terms of U.S. Reindustrialization, one of the key area it will be green energy or new renewable energy, right? China is
Yep.
way ahead and
Yeah.
in this and but the Trump and the Republicans are very hostile to renewable energy. What's your view on that? How will be US to get a foothold in this industry if the administration is totally against it?
So I'm a big fan of solar, not so much a wind. I think solar is incredible. The Chinese have such an advantage in solar that I've advocated forget trying to make solar panels, focus on putting the electric generation capacity in place.
Mm.
Take the Chinese solar panels, get that energy because you're benefiting by getting the clean energy, right? You don't need to worry at this point trying to compete with China on making solar panels is a dead end. Why the Republicans are so against it is solar renewables in particular, along with climate change, have been used as a giant political grift in the United States to suck out US taxpayer money. So all these DNC family insiders, they all have climate change companies, they all have solar companies, and then they get $100 million and then they just walk away. So that's why they're so against this solar. But yeah, it's short-sighted to be
Well, I would
against
say
renewables.
that the reason they are against it is because they were deeply in pocket with the oil industry.
There's some of that, but you see, if you look at the oil and gas, they're heavy into renewables as well now. They're trying to transition. Solar's gotten so cheap now that it's obviously that's the future. Solar and nuclear. Nuclear is going to get a whole revitalization in the U.S. It's got to, they got to move fast on that. That's clean energy, but we only have one plant in construction right now. We need 50. So you're going to see nuclear and solar come up, I think, in U.S. both. Oil
So,
and gas, like, coal's dying anyway. It's too expensive. It's dying a death. It's
well,
not.
Mr. Trump likes the coal miners and he want more.
So it's a concept of I think from his standpoint is why would you lay off all these coal workers before you have the new energy, right? So it's also a concept of um what do you want to why lay all these people off if you don't have the new energy yet? So let the market take effect. Whereas the DNC people wanted to cut the actual energy production before the new energy is there. So it's kind of we'll see. It doesn't really, at the end of the day, it won't matter. Coal's dying anyway. Renewables is going to take over and nuclear is going to take over as they battle for this IA race.
Um,
So
well, so you are very anti-establishment, I presume. But what about the Trump's cabinet full of billionaires? They are practically the establishment, right? And Trump pardoned all the corrupt Republican lawmakers who were convicted of financial crimes. What do you think of that?
so you have to look at I would say Trump is anti-establishment. There's a lot of business guys there, yes, but he is not he is anti-CIA, anti-deep state establishment. So the deep state has been running the United States since the 60s, okay? And he is the grenade in the political system of the US. And that's why the CIA has gone after him from before he even went in 2016, that they're
Well,
trying
very
to.
unsuccessfully, right? If the CIA really against him, why did they let him win twice? Not once,
They
but
didn't. They
twice.
didn't. They didn't have a choice. The second time, they didn't have a choice. So it was so overwhelmingly popular the second time that you couldn't cheat the voting systems anymore. And there's been how many assassination attempts? How many? The whole Russia hoax was CIA driven. They've been going after him from day one because they're afraid they can't control him. He's not an
Well, if
insider.
it's all a deep state conspiracy, these people are terrible at the conspiracy. They didn't actually succeed at any point. They didn't.
Well, same as their wars. How successful are their wars? They lose
What
every
about
war.
the pardoning of the Chinese crypto billionaire? That
I don't follow his case closely. I don't really have it. I don't have a comment. I know who you're talking about, but I didn't really
you know what
follow
I
his
think?
case.
It's just total abuse of his pardoning power. I think the U.S. need to change this presidential power. It's subject to total personal abuse. And
Yeah,
Trump,
well, the whole legal system is you saw how they went after Trump for ridiculous things was also heavy, heavy abused. When you
well,
have the CIA meddling in US elections, that's an absolute dead stop, should be not happen. And that happened. The FBI and the CIA are trying to maneuver US elections the way they want it. And
well,
that can't happen.
now you have Cash Patel in FBI and was John Radcliffe in CIA. So when are they gonna disclose all the deep state conspiracy stuff?
They
Are you
they have
expecting any
they've
day
hidden
soon?
some, they've kept some hidden and they've disclosed other ones. They've put Brennan and these other guys have just gotten subpoenas, right? So it's moving through the system. How fast, I don't know. But Trump has no choice but to prosecute these people and go after them because once he's out of office, they're going to come back hard at him. So the Trump family will end up in jail by these people because he has fought the system. He didn't want the Ukraine war. He didn't want the endless deindustrialization. He wants an America first, whereas their whole game in Washington, D.C. is to extract taxpayer money, get it offshore, U.S. aid, get the money offshore, then my family's company can get a contract and then rewash it back in the United States. You saw that with Biden, tens of millions of dollars in payments from all kinds of oligarchs, Ukraine money, It's just ridiculous. It's so corrupt
Well,
that somebody's got to get control of it.
well, I guess there will be another day's topic. We can do a deep dive on this conspiracy and CIA's conspiracies stuff.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
Anytime.
it's 2 o'clock, so thank you very much for the time,
Yep.
and
Thank you, Hanya.
thank
Talk to you
you.
next time.
Thank
Yep.
next time. Thank you.
Yep. Take care.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye. Okay.